Hey everyone, welcome to this week's tutorial on C#, WPF and .NET applications. So basically in this tutorial we're going to be looking at WPF using .NET Core and C#. So what I'm going to do in this tutorial is I'm just going to run over all the different types of WPF and XAML layouts you can have in your Windows applications, especially if you're going to be building Windows GUI applications. You might want to lay things out this way. So the question is why WPF and XAML? And it's just because there's just so much control. I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons why people actually tend towards WPF, but for me personally, it's just this great little markup language to easily lay out these screens and windows and everything quite quickly and easily without too much thought having to go into it, and basically then just getting it to look good quite early on and quite quickly. So before we get started in this tutorial, I just want to say if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so now and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss any of these tutorials. So what we'll do now is I'm just going to show you how to get to create this project. So basically I opened up Visual Studio, and now I'm just going to, what I did is I created a new project, and then I basically just searched for WPF and I chose WPF app.NET Core. So you'll just click there, you'll click next, and you'll create your application. Then you'll basically have this window which has your XAML view over here, where you can basically type markup to create various elements and widgets on this little screen up here, and it will render as you basically type this out. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to run over some of the layout types. So one of the simplest layout types you have that you can use in WPF and XAML is basically the stack panel. So we'll create the stack panel tag, and when we close that bracket, it will populate the closing bracket for us as well, and then we can start adding widgets to the stack panel. So basically a stack panel is going to add elements from the top down and keep adding them, and then basically it will fill the full width of the screen. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to just create a button. So you can use this button tag here, and then inside the inner text of this button, you'll just put the text of your button. So basically then we'll just go and copy this a few times so you can see a stack panel in action. So you'll see it's now rendering it one below the other. Very simple. Stack panel just creates this list sort of form. So maybe it's good for lists or whatever layouts you have, or maybe putting grids within grids within grids, or panels within panels, just laid out below one another. So that's maybe a good application for it. You can decide, but that's how stack panels work. Next, let's look at something similar to the stack panel. It's called the wrap panel. And what I'll do is I'll just basically change this for wrap panel and wrap panel. So now you'll see basically it's populating it horizontally, and I just want to show you why it's called a wrap panel. So if we go ahead and copy this a few times like that, and maybe a few more times like that, you'll see that once it reaches the end of the screen, it will start to wrap and then move to the next line. So basically wrap panels are useful when you are trying to basically build applications which are quite fluid, and allows you to just wrap things as well. So now a wrap panel can have a direction as well, which we call an orientation. So you can apply an orientation like this, and you can basically then say vertical, and then it will apply it in this direction, the vertical direction. And the default obviously is horizontal. So as you can see, a wrap panel can be useful if you need to wrap elements on the screen. And let's look at the next type of layout that you can do. I'm just going to get rid of this code over here, and then we're going to start fresh with a new type of layout. So this is one of the more popular layouts, and that's something called the grid layout. And we'll actually create our example of what we spoke about in the beginning of this tutorial using this grid layout, and then you'll see how it can practically be used with your applications. So basically a grid layout needs to be defined. So you need to define things like rows and columns, and it basically works like a table. So it's going to have a column, row, and whatever else within your window. So to create some of these row and column definitions, we need to start off by defining them within this grid block. And then what we'll do here is we'll just say grid.column definitions. And then we can basically define some columns in here. So we'll create a column definition, and we'll just create a couple of blank ones like this so you can see what it actually does. So now basically it's defaulting to 50% on each side. And if you wanted to make one column smaller than the other, you could do width, and you can make this 100, and you'll see that it resizes to 100. So for our example, we're just going to make this 200 because we will be using that a little later to lay something out that we want to use. This second column, we're going to make it a width of also about 200, and then we'll finally just create a filler column which will have a star. Basically then it will just fill in the rest and distribute whatever space it has on that column. Next we want to define some rows. So we'll have to do the exact same thing, except now we'll say .row definitions, and we'll close it off again. And then what we'll do is we'll just create a row definition instead. So we want to create 3 rows, so I'm going to copy this 3 times, and you'll see that it's basically evenly distributed. And then that's not what we want for example, but let's go ahead and refine this a little more. So here you can basically define a height, and I'm going to make this 30, and I'm going to make all of them 30 actually, because that looks pretty good to me. And height 30 like that. And we can finally just create a filler row in here, and we'll just make that star. Basically it's going to fill in the rest of the space, and we now have this columns and rows basically. So here's what I want to do. I want to basically go ahead and create a very basic login form, but first I need to just show you how this works. Basically we'll assign a number to each of these. So this will be column 0, 1, 2. This will be row 0, 1, 2, 3. And basically we'll then be able to assign based on these column numbers and rows where we want to place our various widgets. So what we're going to do first is we're going to just create a username text box here, and then we'll basically set the row and column where we want it displayed. So here's what we'll do. We'll use a text block. We'll define the text, and that'll be username. We'll do grid.row, and we'll make that 0. Grid.column, and we'll make that 0 as well. Then what we want to do is we want it to vertically align in the center, so we'll do vertical alignment, and we'll make that center, and then we'll just close this off, and you'll see that it nicely aligns in the center on the vertical, and that looks pretty nice. So now we'll do the same for a password. So now you'll see that as soon as we do this, just update this to password, it's going to basically be placed in the same position. So now to place it in the right position, we want it at column 0 and row 1. So we'll leave column 0 and we'll make this row 1. And you'll see that it moves down to this grid row over here. Next, we want to just create some text input. So we need to create a text box. So we'll call text box like this. And basically we want this to be in grid.row, basically column 1, row 0. So row 0 and then grid.column 1. So see now that text box has moved into that position. Next, we want to create a password box. So create password box, do the grid column, and we want it in column 1 over here, and we want it in grid row 1 over here. So if you click that, you'll see it's going to have invalid markup, and as soon as you fix your markup, it's going to be correct. Next, we want to just create a login button. So actually, I'm not going to copy that. I'll just create a button like this, and we'll just say login. And then basically we need to define where it is. So it's going to be 0, 1, 2. So grid row 2 dot row 2, and then column is going to be 1. So grid dot column is 1. So you'll see now it's basically got the username, password, and we give these 2 fields and a login button. So let's run this and see if it works. So you'll see you have your username, password, and login. So you can make this a lot nicer. You can add some margins, but that's the basics of laying out a very simple login form using XAML and WPF. Now, before we move on, I just want to show you how you can actually integrate events with these various widgets. If you want to do a login, we can just double click on this, and it's going to create this event for us in C#, which we can use. So I'm just going to create a message box, and I'm just going to show and just say login button clicked. And basically when we run this and we click on login, you'll see that it creates that little message box. So the nice thing about WPF as well is that you've got this hot reload. So basically when you are basically coding over here, you can hot reload this app all the time while in development, which is a very nice feature to have. So definitely check that out. Next thing we need to look at is something called a canvas layout, which is a little bit more advanced, but quite useful if you are quite stuck and you can't actually get something to be placed exactly where you want it on the screen. So to show you how this works, it's basically going to allow us to place objects at particular coordinates. So I'll just create a canvas, just give it some width of, let's say, 600 and a height of, let's say, 400, and we'll close it off, and you'll see that it draws in this little window over here. So what you can also do, you can also move this around and you can make it bigger. And then what this will basically do is it's going to move to a margin-based coordinate system, which will then basically allow you to, when you resize your window, it will still be locked onto these margins, and your canvas will then resize accordingly with that window. But what we'll do, we'll keep it like this for now, and we'll just open up the canvas here, and then we can place some items inside of it. So let's just do a basic button, and we'll just call it test, and you'll see it basically allocates it to position 0, 0 up here in the top left corner. What we can now do is we can then say canvas.left, and we can make this 300, and you'll see it moves it left 300 units. Then basically we'll go and do a top, and we'll make this 300 units as well, or actually 300, not 400, like that, and it'll place it at the coordinates that we gave it. So maybe not very useful in general, but if you have a very specific need where you need to place widgets at a certain position on screen, then a canvas might be what you need to be able to do this. So take note of that and see where you can make use of a canvas. The next and final layout we need to look at is something called docking. So basically we'll create a dock panel and then we'll go and add some widgets to that. So dock panel, and we'll just leave it as default for now, and then I'm going to show you what it basically does. So we'll create a button and we'll have to make a different button. So we'll just create test1 and let's call this test2, test3, test4. And basically what it will do is it will just do it horizontally by default. But then what you can do is you can move them around. So and position them based on docking positions on screen. So what you can do, you can do dock panel dot dock, and you can set this one to bottom, and you'll see it will dock to the bottom of the window. Then you could do dock panel dot dock, and we'll make it the left. So nothing changed because it was already on the left, but let's do a couple more now, then you'll see what it does. Dock, and we'll make this right, and you'll basically now see what this is actually doing. And then button test4, let's make a dock panel dock top. So basically it's already on the top because it's touching the top border. So it's just basically staying where it was. So that's all good. So basically docks just allows you to place things at the extremities of the window, on the right, left, top, bottom, and all those directions, and it will then be placed there for you. You can obviously apply some width if you want to. So if we're doing this left and we did a width of say 100, then you'll see that it modifies it accordingly. So dock panels, very nice if you want to basically dock a, let's say a menu bar or a list box or something on the left here, and it must always stay on the left. Then a dock panel is going to be what you require to lay out that sort of element. So guys, that's basically the end of this tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, please like below, and if you have any questions about WPF, C# or .NET Core, then please feel free to ask them below in the comments section. And thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.